Confucius and some of those Eastern philosophers and stuff like that. There's so much that is passed down to them. And then so much of the history we have is because something fantastic. All right, welcome to another episode of the Joe and Doug Show. If you were with us on Tuesday, we unpacked and kind of introduced one of Joe's favorite books that's slowly moving up my list of favorite books called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And we wanted to unpack one of the chapters today. And we're going to dive in and talk a little bit about the ghost of fear. So why don't you set up a little bit what the ghosts are and kind of how he presents that chapter, and then we can dive into the particular topic of fear.
Yeah, so it's probably one of the most segmented chapters, like dedicating an entire chapter to fear. And the ghosts of fear are the categories of what robs joy and opportunity, and it just sucks life out of them. And each one of those, when you go through the different segments, you can always picture someone you know in your life that exhibits that ghost and keeps that ghost around. And part of the conquering self is that knowing what these rationales are for inviting these ghosts in, and then doing everything you can to keep them out of your life. Totally makes sense.
So when it comes to fear, one of the ways that I will approach that, and have heard it taught, and this is not original to me necessarily, but is the idea of the acronym of false evidence appearing real, that we create this false truth that's not necessarily a truth, and then we live out that reality, and we end up having what we are terrified of.
Yep.
And so we're going to get into a bit of faith and fear. They both use the same muscle. One of my friends and guest speaker that we have, author at the church, who'll be coming in December, Ty Buckingham, says fear is just faith in the wrong thing. And I love that line, and I think you'd agree with that sentiment.
For sure.
But let's unpack this, because people are afraid of all sorts of stuff. I was dealing with a super irrational fear today. My son maybe it's rational. He got stung by a bee 2 or 3 times about a month ago. And we had an issue with bees, and we had to have the exterminator come out, and these yellow jackets. We moved in a new house, and so got that all taken care of. But now anything that moves outside is obviously a bee, and it is on its way to sting my son. And we were outside today because it's beautiful. And he was completely irrational, and there was no talking him out of it. It didn't matter if I actually killed what it was and showed it to him. It didn't matter. I obviously killed the wrong thing. And he was convinced that there was a bee out there coming to get him. And as crazy as that was for me to try and combat that fear, our fears are much the same way. We're convinced that there's a bee out there coming to get us, or coming to take something from us, or this health thing is right around the corner, or this finance, and we create these bees that are coming after us. And it doesn't matter. People in our life all the time say, no, that's not the way it is, and they can show us evidence to the contrary. Like, literally, I killed another bug and showed him, this is what you were worried about. It's not a bee. And it didn't matter. He was completely irrational about it. And I think as adults, we just kind of dress those things up, and we make them okay, and we learn to live with them. So let's unpack that kind of concept of fear, because I think fear and faith make you irrational in different ways.
Yes.
So let's unpack that a little bit.
All right. So, and no matter what, I've been doing this forever, and no matter what happens, fear is always there. It is built into who we are. Okay. So if you're not on purpose trying to combat against it, then it's owning you from time to time.
Yeah.
Just the other day, I'm walking and we're putting the pool stuff away. I'm doing the filters and stuff like that. And I have this little trick where I jump off the deck and go on, and you're getting super close to being able to fall in the pool while you're doing this little trick, right? And every time my brain goes to, what if I fall in, right? And I'm like, you're rehearsing falling in so often. Like, how do I counter that? What's the deal? Or, no, you're not going to fall in. That's silly. But think about why your brain goes there every time, because it's protecting itself.
Yeah.
It doesn't want to fall in. But as long as you do on the other side, where you're rehearsing the things you want to happen often enough, you can counter, those things out. But it's literally replaying a scenario that doesn't exist, using your imagination, right? And then seeing what you don't want to happen, but having such crisp detail into what's going to happen until eventually you find yourself exactly in the position that you wanted to avoid.
Yeah. Do you have any fears, or did you have fears growing up, and how did you combat them? Like, I'm afraid of heights. I do not. It's not the heights so much as the falling and dying part that I don't like.
Right.
But some of those things, I don't know, some are built in. I'm sure I had an incident when I was a child that I don't remember where I fell, and I've been terrified of falling ever since. There's some people that just certain things are built in. For instance, most people, if you rate fears, are afraid of public speaking. That's usually number one. Number two on people's list. And number three is death. Yep. Which I find hilarious because people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. I mean, think about that. We're more afraid of giving the eulogy than actually being in the casket.
Yep.
And so on the fear list, do you have one or two or three that kind of always resurface for you that you have to fight?
I use that list to kill all of those fears. And I have a process for my big fear, I guess if you were to give me any, was fear for other people. Things I can't protect other people. I can't control their thoughts. Yeah. So when people get themselves cornered.
That's a big one for parents, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Can't make the choices for your kids. Yep. Sometimes you'd like to.
Yeah. But I don't make it be, it doesn't control me at any deals. I don't limit activities or speech or anything like that. What's going to happen is going to happen. So I'm more cautious with other people than I am with my own life.
Interesting. I mentioned heights. When I got married, and this fear hasn't necessarily gone away, I've just had to learn to deal with it. I'm not a huge fan of bugs. Like any kind. Doesn't matter if they're flying or whatever. I can't control them. And but as I've become a dad and all that, I've had to man up, so to speak, because the kids are terrified of the bees, like I had to deal with today. And it's interesting because when I got married in premarital counseling, they asked us to write down 25 expectations that we had for our spouse and 25 reasons that we love them. And one of my expectation, like top 5, was that Sam would kill all of the bugs because I do not do bugs. And as I've become a dad, I've had to man up and just kind of deal with it. And it's interesting because some of those fears it's completely irrational. And in the same way with heights, like it's completely irrational. I've been on some of the tallest mountains in Israel, but while I'm there, I'm like, okay, we're going to walk past this as if like I'm going to be the one that this giant metal, sidewalk is going to fall, 2000, or the cable car is going to all of a sudden stop working because, I'm the tourist that's going to do it. And, but you have that in your head. And, sometimes you just kind of go. And then some people they dance on the edge. We were on the top of Masada. It's 2,000 feet up, right? And it's pretty much a straight cliff drop. And I was there with Pastor Jermel, and he's hanging off the side, taking selfies and stuff. I can't even watch that because I'm dying inside that he's going to fall. And my wife, of course, was, dangling off the side, taking pictures and making fun of me because I'm not coming within 10 feet of that edge because I value my life. So talk about how do you said you had a process for combating fears. So heights is a simple one. Let's use that.
Yeah, let's use it. So I went to Virginia Beach, this last summer, and they had this obstacle course that was 20 feet in the air. Saw. And when you first get there, you have your normal things, you're careful and you're working on your balance and you're moving slow. And about 20, 30 minutes into the deal, you're walking around like you're not 20 feet up. You trust your harness, you trust your rig, you trust what you're doing. You've done it enough times now. I stopped myself literally, and there was a ledge on one of the trees that was that much. And I'm walking around this tree, not holding on to anything. And I'm like, you didn't almost fall. But if you thought you were going to fall, you would have walked differently. You would have cozied up to the tree. You'd have been totally off of your game. So now let's just, and I was thinking to myself, there's a sidewalk, for instance. You've never feared falling off the sidewalk. No. But you put the size of a sidewalk a mile in the air, and you would hug the middle of it like it was something you were about to fall off of. So what psychologically is pushing you to the edges in your mind is death. Death is the one that's saying, hey, if you make a wrong move, you're dead, and you don't want to be dead, so let's stay towards the center, right?
Right. 100%. On my honeymoon, as a matter of fact, we went to an island for an excursion day, and we, got in the van, and then they took us to a boat, and it was an hour boat ride, and we got to swim with dolphins, and it was really cool. We did several things that I was not afraid of, but then they had zip lining, and my wife was like, let's go. And I'm like, I'll hold the stuff. And she ziplined from the top of this island out over the ocean. And I watched, I took pictures, I cheered her on. But there was not a snowball's chance and where that I was getting on that zipline.
But if you wanted to conquer it, like, you don't really have the fear. I mean, you would rather not.
Sure.
But if it meant it, you could totally do it. And if you did it enough times, you would totally
That's true. Because when I've gone to Israel, we've done some mountains and some some spaces that was a little sketchy.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get up there. I wanted to see. And I
don't consider that a fear because you just don't like it. Like, I can go to an amusement park and I can ride roller coasters like crazy, but there's some rides I just don't have a preference for. I'm not scared of it, but I'll pass on that one, right?
That makes sense. Well, let's get into some of the fears, if that makes sense. Not just the preference fears, like I don't like heights, or I'd rather not squish bugs or have them near me. What do you think are some of the fears that people have? Obviously, you have that fear of death. We talked about public speaking, but some of those deep-seated ones that drive the other ones, because fear of public speaking is actually not really the fear of public speaking, right? It's either the fear of embarrassment or it's a fear of your own identity not being enough. So what do you think are some of those big ones, big fears?
And I've studied through the Industrial Revolution through today, and every generation has a different fear, like the 6 that we list here. This culture today is the fear of criticism, or the fear of the embarrassment that you were talking about. If nobody wants to feel stupid.
Yeah.
And especially in a connected world with social media, you can do something and it might not even be stupid, but the criticism that any video or anything that you put out there is immense. I can't imagine what my kid and the kids below that are going to do to escape that pressure, because it's not going to get any better. It's not like we have this magic principle that's going to make people behave better than they are right now. It's going to be the opposite. But I would say that's number one. Fear of death was when Black Plague and back there. I mean, that was probably the worst. People could care less about being criticized, but if you die from Black Plague, it's probably going to ruin your day.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, ruin your day. Yes, it would. I think when you look at the big fears, like you're talking about, the things that really drive people, people would much rather, I think, not engage on and deal with the fear, not conquer it. They would much rather leave the fear in place and learn to live with it, right? We live in a culture that will kind of massage it out, counsel it out, yoga it out, everything else, to just kind of let me learn to deal with it.
Right, Matt.
And, if I can't get rid of the monster, at least let me learn how to put it on a leash and walk it around a little bit.
Right.
And then we create these worlds that we live in where we've prettied up the fear. And in some cases, some people even wear it as a badge of honor, that they deal with X, Y, and Z fear. And I've mastered it, but, it's still with me. It still controls me, but, I have it on a leash now, and I have it until that dog turns on you and tries to devour you.
All right, well, let's do commentary. Since we're talking about Napoleon Hill, I looked up the 6 ghosts of fear, and I'm going to say them one and just give me the punchline, your position on it, and how it rates. Okay.
So 6. So you're going to list all 6 off.
The first one is going to be the fear of poverty.
Yeah, who wants to be poor? Nobody. But that plays into keeps people from risking, keeps people from stepping out in their calling, their faith, or all of that. Because, well, what if it fails? And if I put all of my chips to the center of the table and go all in on this idea, I'll let my family down. I'll be poor in that sense. I think that's a huge one for people, because we play it safe then. We want the white picket fence, the 2.5 kids and a golden retriever, and we want to just, coast. And then we wake up one day in our 50s and we're like, what have I done with my life? When in actuality, you only get one shot at this, so you might as well risk it. Even if you end up poor, at least you tried doing something awesome.
Yeah. And so one of the first Debbie Joe agreements were that, I'm going to take a bunch of risks and we're going to do a bunch of stuff. What's the standard? Like, you don't want to risk down to this. And she said, you know what? I'd love you if we were in a cardboard box. So as long as I have access to cardboard boxes,
you're good.
And her, I'm good. All risks that are other stuff on the table.
Cool.
So, anyway, so that's poverty. Second one is criticism.
Yeah, criticism's interesting. You mentioned social media and the world we kind of live in. One of the phrases that I've kind of adopted, I heard from a mentor early on, is that if you live for the applause or the praise of men, you'll die by their criticism. And I think criticism stings because we value so much of the other end. When we have people in our corner cheering us on and applauding us, we overbuy into that. And so then when they're not applauding us or they're critiquing us, we overvalue that as well. And it stings. I think criticism for me, if you're going to overcome that fear, really comes back to identity and purpose. If I'm comfortable in who I am and what I'm built to do, I don't care whether you like it or not. This is what I'm going to do, whether I'm successful or fail at it. Like, this is what I'm hardwired to do and what God's built me to do. So, how about you for criticism? How do you handle that? Because you run a business, so,
Right.
you got your hands in a couple different
And
pots.
see, criticism doesn't bother me. In fact, it helps me become stronger. And honestly, I put everybody. It matters who you answer to, right?
Mhm.
If men are on even playing field or behind, then you
Mhm.
don't have to answer to anybody who's wearing skin like you do. Nobody's
Mhm.
better than you. Nobody's ahead
Yeah,
of you.
yeah.
They just have opinions, and sometimes I'll listen to it, and sometimes I won't. And if it's valuable, I'll take it. And if it's not valuable, whatever. So don't get your feelings hurt. You're not God, and it's not something that rules over me. I
Do you have people that their criticism weighs more than others?
no, it doesn't.
So, like, if Debbie criticized something you were doing, that wouldn't sting more than
No,
a
because
coworker?
we do the same thing. We
Mhm.
are. I don't criticize to hurt people. I criticize to help somebody,
Mm.
whatever. And there's times when I know she doesn't want a criticism. She doesn't like to learn right now, right? So I keep it to myself.
It's marriage 101. We'll be doing that in the weeks to come.
So I'm forthcoming that way where
Yeah.
I'm like, I have something to say right now. Do you want to learn? And if she says no, I do back away.
Yeah.
So.
Well, because sometimes people are, especially our spouses, they just want us to hold them and cry with them. They don't want us to fix it, or they want us to just listen and be a part of their world. And that is the hardest thing as a man, because I just want to fix it. Let me help you.
Third thing is ill health, sickness.
Ill health. Yeah, sure. You see that, especially right now. I mean, you talk about COVID. Everybody's like, every sneeze, every cough, everybody's like, is that, you got the Rona? You sick?
Right.
And I saw a meme on Facebook that I thought was quite funny. It said, if we're not careful, this fall and winter is going to turn into the Salem witch trials. The first time somebody sneezes at the office or whatever. And to some extent, like, yeah, COVID's a real thing. Some people have really been affected by it. But at the end of the day, like, are we going to be controlled by that? Are we going to live in fear? Or are we going to be wise and continue to do what we're built to do? But yeah, you definitely wrestle with that. And when I think I have personally wrestled with that one, when I realize when people close to you die, it makes you evaluate that. My dad passed and my father-in-law passed. I know I went super introspective on a number of things, but I had that sense of like, oh, I could be next. And you have to overcome that cycle in your head or it'll ruin you.
And one of the big concerning things with me is I don't fear death at all. I mean, it's something that when I'm supposed to cash in, it's just game time, right? But I believe that you fearing any kind of disease or sickness is the stresses that causes disease and sickness. So I mean, why would I cause that for myself to be worrying about it? Now, if I get a sniffle, then I have things that I can do to help me in that. But I don't fear it. I mean, I think.
Speaking of this, you've been posting about it.
Oh, yeah.
So you're in your boost immune system mode.
Time, yes.
So just real quick, because I'm sure people follow you on Facebook and see this. What are you doing to boost your immune system and why are you doing it?
All right. So I have a 10-day regimen. All right. So every once in a while, I start seeing other people get sick. I can throw my body into this 10-day cycle where I deprive my body of like sugar, simple sugars, because all the germs and bacteria, the viruses,
thrive
in order to do it, they need glucose. If I don't give it glucose, they have a harder time. So at the same time, the two punch after the glucose starvation is that I got to get the immune system boosted. And sometimes, like when people do exercise to boost the immune system, you're speeding up the cycles of the body and you're working on respiration, moving blood around and repairing cells. You can do nutritional stuff at the same time. So I do everything. So it is like the guns that used to just put everything in and shoot it. That's me. Like everything is in it. I'm eating mushrooms and doing zinc, doing apple cider vinegar.
What does apple cider vinegar do?
So it's and it's more of a nutritional thing where it ramps up your what's that called when you digest food and metabolism.
Yep,
So it
yep.
ramps up your metabolism.
Okay.
And then I'll have some hot peppers, and then you get an endothermic reaction, and your body heats up, and it's basically taking your natural body functions and putting it on overload, and then your body just wants to tackle everything.
Interesting.
And then you go into fasting, which then does the your body goes into repairing and recycling cells, so you end up killing off a bunch of white blood cells, and the weaker of the cells get flushed out and get replaced with new ones.
Interesting. So if you're fearing ill health,
something you can do about it, right?
Something you can definitely do about it. I think there's something you can do about all of these, but stuff like that, it's like, well, just channel it into this area. So
yeah, and that's why I said, like, even these, we sat down and said, this is a scary thing, and how do I want to handle it? And as soon as we handle it, that's just our process for dealing with it. And again, it's because I'm not afraid of any of these things. It really has desensitized me, where when I see other people like crying over a loss and it's not affecting me, I almost feel halfway bad, because it's kind of squeezed that out of me.
You just have resolved in yourself that, it was their time, their number was up, they punched out.
Just like we talked about the other day, where, that's the purpose. As much as I would hate it and somebody else would hate it, they serve the purpose, and that their death makes something else happen. And then I watch the chain of events, and how can I help?
Wow. Interesting.
It's weird, but
no.
Loss of love of someone.
Yeah. That is a fascinating one, because we live in a culture with so much divorce and all kinds of pain attached to that, especially when children are involved. It can be a bit of a mess, and a lot of times I deal with that in what I do. But I think people fear that because they're afraid that they're not worth being loved. And so when somebody rejects you in that way and chooses, or you once had their love and now their love has gone somewhere else, you've had all this stock built up in a person. Now, it could be a spouse, it could be a child that decides that they're not coming home anymore for Christmas and they're going to go somewhere else. Or and parents deal with this, I think, sometimes in a healthy way. Like there's loss that you experience because seasons change. When my wife and I got married, it was different for our parents. Like, they got to celebrate having me in the family, but Sam wasn't at home. Like, there were certain things that her and her parents didn't get to do anymore, and her sister, like, we were creating a new family, and so there was a dynamic between us that all of a sudden, my parents had to honor certain boundaries, and we were building a family of our own. So you experience a type of loss of love. It's more of a different, but I think with that, it all comes down to value. In that sense. And if I believe I'm inherently valuable and made in the image of God, whether someone chooses to love me or not, doesn't affect that. And I think that's probably the healthiest kind of perspective on that. Thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like a serial killer when I go through these lists. I do. I feel like we're going to uncover the fact that I have no soul, and then I'm going to murder a bunch of people.
Well, the question is, Joe, are you torturing animals, setting fires, and bedwetting? That's the trifecta.
No, none of the above.
That's the serial killer trifecta right there.
But anyway, of course, that when I pick, I'm a strategist, and so I take every hypothetical.
Okay.
If I die, what happens? If Ed dies, what happens? If Ryan dies, what happens? I've already gone through the process of what I would do, and now I don't prefer any of that stuff happening.
Sure.
Right? I've come to terms with that it's a possibility, and even if it's a low potential, it's there, and I know what I would do. So I would probably be the husband that wouldn't be in tears. I would be stone cold, like, soul ripped out, but and Deb is gonna kill me. She's gonna punch me in the face when I get home. But anyway, but I think because I'm good at dealing with really like awful things ahead of time, that I'm more prepared if they were to ever happen.
So I'm gonna ask this from a psychological standpoint. Do you think you're just compartmentalizing so that the pain doesn't sting as much when you get there? So you've kind of already decided and put that in this compartment and that in this compartment, so that when tragedy happens to strike, or if it ever does, God forbid, you're just like, you know what? I have this compartment over here. I have it set so that I don't have to go there emotionally, if that makes sense.
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
No, and it's because of my belief in the perception of this world don't matter much. It unglued me from a lot of the attachments.
Yeah.
And you've seen I have attachments to my wife. I love
absolutely
her to death. I'm not separated, but I just don't have this big cord that, you know what I mean, is Oh,
Interesting.
I'm dead tonight. All right, fifth thing.
Warm that sofa up, Deb.
Old age. Old age is the fear of old age.
I don't understand that at all. I'm so pumped to get older. I've had people ask me. I've started to. My mom's side of the family has these nice widow's peak, and I'm starting to get it. You can see it right there. And so I've tried to figure out what hairstyle I can do to kind of live with my hair as long as possible. You understand?
Yes, for sure.
But I've had people ask me. I've started to get a little gray on the sides and stuff. They're like, oh, my hairdresser will say, do you want to dye your hair, Pastor? And I was like, no. I was like, Bible says gray hair is a crown of glory. I'm going full gray or bald or whatever. Like, I don't know. Some people are like super weird about that. They turn 40 and then they're like, oh no, midlife
and I don't know
crisis.
where it comes from either, because every culture they sort of like give accolades to the elderly.
Yeah,
they really do. There's not a culture that's like, oh, you're dead, put them on a boat and set it on fire.
No, I oh, that's funny. No, I think for a lot of folks, I don't know if it's just like the fear of, I wonder if it's not necessarily the fear of getting older, but the fear of not mattering, or what I'm doing doesn't count. I wonder how much of it's attached to purpose. Because you think about it, at 40, 45, right, you hear like the midlife crisis, and I'm going to go out and buy a Ferrari because I've never had that, or I'm going to switch jobs, or I'm going to quit everything, or, a lot of divorces, really interesting, happen just as they're coming into that empty nest season, because the kids were the glue that held them together, and then all of a sudden the kids are gone, and they're like, who are you? We have to be together for the rest of this, and I'm not sure I want to do that. And so you see a lot of marriages break at that point. And so I wonder how much of it is just reevaluating purpose more than it is the fear of old age. I don't know if that makes sense.
Another thing too, like if the other one is loss of love, if you achieved at a certain point, if you feel like if you lost somebody that you can go out in the market and actually attract another person to you, that would be a connecting. Because age would limit. Now, once you buy the thing, you want it to be a lifetime membership, and you don't want to have to do that one again. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, you only have two options. Get older or die. I'll take older.
All right, and the last one is death.
Death, yeah. It totally makes sense. I think even in the realm of faith, when I deal with this with families, I've done a ton of funerals and sitting with families to help them understand and process through this. Like, even though most people, whether they go to church every week or they follow some other faith tradition, most people have a sense of there's something beyond this. Even the most staunchly, secular person, when it comes time to say goodbye to mom or dad, they're thinking mom's looking down on me or dad's looking down, and they have a picture of the afterlife, or whatever word you want to put there. Now, whether or not I agree with it theologically is a different story, but everybody kind of has this perception that life is beyond just what we see here in the physical. We don't live that way, though. And I think what we do in the physical matters. And I know for me, I think where my head goes is like, quote unquote, what I'm going to be missing. Before my dad passed, his health was kind of deteriorating, and we tried to like motivate him to because he could have affected his health. It was all stuff he pretty much did to himself. And so we were trying to don't you want to see Charlotte grow up? Like, you were trying, and it sounds horrible, but we were trying to do those things. I've heard of other people, as somebody at the church, actually, got married, their husband, was smoking cigarettes, and they had a baby, and the wife was trying to help him quit and stuck a picture of the baby inside his pack of cigarettes and said, Daddy, don't you want to see me grow up? And wrote some notes.
That's cold.
That's rough, but it worked. Yeah, to be honest. I think that that idea of the fear of death is more like the fear of missing out, because I'm not going to be here on earth. So like I said, everybody kind of has this hope of I'll see them again. Again, whether I think it's theologically correct or not, but I don't know, I want to be here to meet my grandkids or my great grandkids, God willing. I want to get to see my kids grow up and succeed and what dreams they chase. And, and we don't know what comes after this. So there's that big question mark. We have some beliefs about what comes after this, but still a big question mark. And so we don't know what we get to experience on the other side and how much we get to see. And are they really looking down on us? I mean, those kind of questions that we do to kind of comfort ourselves. And I think it's fascinating but I think it's more the fear of missing out. The FOMO.
Right. So I don't know if this was an actual Black Mirror episode or if it just existed in my crazy brain, but it might have been a dream too. But anyway, there was an episode that I can remember that in the future they knew exactly when you were going to die, and then so you had this heads-up display, and as you did things, it would show you that it made a lesser number and it made a bigger number. So you were basically guided by things that were either making your life more or less. So I mean that. To me, would you want to know what day you died?
Interesting question. And I've been asked that before. I think I would, but then I think I wouldn't.
For planning's sake,
I would totally want to know, because then I would milk out and squeeze out everything I could between here and there. There's a story in the Bible where one of the guys in the Old Testament basically comes to God, and God kind of like he's going to die, and he kind of understands that, and he petitions God to give him 15 more years of life, and God obliges.
I didn't know that was a possibility. Let me write that one down. Jeez.
It's one of those stories that you look at and you're like, wow, like, the scriptures say that God numbers our days before any of them come to pass. And so at some level, like, you either believe that or you don't. So when it comes to the fear of death, kind of rationalizing, like, if I believe that all of my days are numbered, well, then it is what it is. And think about it. Like, we've all seen a healthy person in their 40s. Bob Harper had a heart attack. Trainer from Biggest Loser. You see people all the time like that. And then you see the grandma in her 80s and 90s, lighting one Virginia Slim with the end of another. Right. And my great uncle Naki died at 96. He woke up every morning, did a shot of whiskey, smoked a cigar, like totally unhealthy by all standards, but for the most part was fine until he was 96 years old. And you look at that, and then you see other people who try so desperately to be healthy, and they get cancer in their 30s or 40s or 50s. And so some of that stuff we look at and say, oh, that's not fair. But if we really believe that our days are numbered, I certainly don't want to give God a reason to take me early. But at the end of the day, like, if he's mapped out all of our days before one of them comes to pass, then I have to trust that at some point my ticket's going to come and I'm going to punch out. And whether that's at 45 or 95, I don't know. And so have you ever seen there's a you'd probably like the YouTube video, not the book, but there's a book and a YouTube video called The Last Lecture.
It sounds familiar.
So basically, a short version is there was a professor, and he got diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he gives his final lecture to students, and they turned it into a book. And it's really inspiring, kind of very introspective, kind of what he looked at and what he learned when he got his terminal illness. And it kind of goes hand in hand. There's another book that I really love called 20,000 Days and Counting. And there was a gentleman who turned 54. His name's Robert Smith. He's the author of the book. And on his 54th birthday, he realized he had lived 20,000 days. And there's a scripture in Psalms that said, Lord, teach me to number my days that I might gain wisdom. And he took that scripture and he got himself a hotel room for his birthday by himself for 2 days. And he went in there and he planned out his next 20,000 days. What am I going to do to 108? And then out of that came this book. And I think it's like the second or third chapter. He actually tells you to put the book down and to go to YouTube and watch this YouTube video. And it's of a gentleman in, I think, Britain or Wales, somewhere over in United Kingdom. And he finds out he's got 6 weeks to live. Terminal illness. He's got teenage and early 20-something daughter, wife, family, the whole deal. And he decides for his last 6 weeks of life, he's going to let a film crew follow him around. And the one portion that he tells you to watch is the guy goes to the cemetery and stands on his grave where he's going to be laid to rest in a few weeks and just talks. And if you don't cry, Joe, we'll check for a soul.
Okay, all right. That'll be the test, the big audit, whether or not.
But it's really passionate because he talks about how in these last, weeks, he's lived more than he has his whole life. there was so much that he played safe and so much that he, chose not to do because, well, I'll have time to do that. When I retire, I'll do that. When this happens, I'll do that. But now I have 6 weeks. And it changes your perspective. And it's one of the things that in that book, 20,000 Days and Counting, he talks about, like, the very first chapter is you have to come to terms with your own mortality, that you will punch out at some point. And so how do I take every moment from this day to that and squeeze every bit out of it?
Yeah. And so you can take something like the fear of death, but use it as a motivating factor. Because here's what happens. Everybody tells you, slow down, enjoy life a little bit. You know what happens when you do that?
Yeah.
You take for granted things, and you don't like try to take advantage of things. I got a ton of time. I just slow down. And then if you got people like me who mainline caffeine into my arm, I go too fast, and there's some things like
you miss
2 months go by in 2 seconds, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a somewhere behind. And one thing I will say, that if somebody plodded in and told me what day I was going to die, I don't necessarily think much would change. I think that there's some inefficiencies, things that I waste time at, that would disappear immediately. But I don't necessarily think that I would choose to do different things because, with kids, your kid's going to be 18 and not even know you anymore, right? They're going to go off and start their own family. So I take advantage of every second to be with my kid now. I don't wait for something like that to happen. So
yeah, it's funny what becomes so important. This weekend, I'm going to talk about how we have all the resources we need. We have. And you're going to like this message, I think, this weekend. But one of the points I'm going to talk about is, time is this divine resource. We all have the same amount. We get 24 hours, not promised tomorrow. And but in there, how much time do we waste? And I did some research, and the average adult American spends 10 to 11 hours on a screen. To put that into context, it's 40% of your year. It's 5 months.
holy shit.
Like, just take 1 hour off that. Now, I know some people will be like, well, I don't spend that much time on there. I spend 5 hours. That's fine. That's still more than 2 months. I can give you 2 months of your year back.
Just in that motion.
Just in that.
Wow.
And you think about so many other things. And so it's one of the things I'm going to hit, and maybe I'll steal a little bit of my thunder because some people from church are watching. But, honestly, when we think about time, we're either wasting it or investing it. And we need to put it in things that have great ROI, like relationships, like you're talking about with Ryan and Debbie and your kids. You need to put it into things that are going to outlive you, your legacy, your purpose. Prayer is one of those things that I say outlives you. Even if you die, your prayer will live on in the heart of God and in the people that heard it. So, time is one of those things that when you get that death diagnosis, you realize all of a sudden, like, what's important, and I'm going to squeeze everything out. But let's have that moment now. So
post sermon, I'm going to do a sermon on time travel, and then teach all those people who are now feeling guilty about wasting so much time. They can go back and
fix
make it right.
Okay, time travel. I think we're due for another conspiracy theory one. Yeah. We should have some fun.
I got us off track on this whole thing.
No,
we
were
good. Supposed to do it, but anyway.
No, it was good. I think anybody that's dealing with fear, the best way is to tackle it head on. Don't make it a pet. Don't learn to live with it. You can overcome your fears, and it just takes some time. And we're not talking about like heights and that sort of stuff like we were kind of playing with in the beginning, but legitimate, real things that consume us and change our motivations, and we can turn that fear into fuel and really let it drive us. So
yeah, and people who are just getting started on this, I mean, we're talking and it sounds really cliche, right? But we're talking in the literal sense. I mean, when you look at, you can pick anything that you feared this morning. You can fear losing your job this morning. You can fear not having enough money for something. And those seeds, you're going to do two things. You're going to nurture and harvest a seed of fear that's going to make war fear, or you can decide to say, okay, well, there's a reason that my fear of job was in my mind this morning, and I need to wipe that off. You two choices. You can delusional version and just wipe it off and not think about it, and it really didn't go anywhere, but it's there, right?
Just close your eyes.
Yeah. Or you can figure out what the heck's scaring you so bad about it, and there's something you can do to make it better. These evaluations that we do on a regular basis, it's like laundry. It never ends. You're constantly going to have to nurture it and make it better. And you're not going to get one day and say, all right, I'm fixed.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm done.
Unless you really, really don't mind smelling. You can stop doing laundry. I think to close this out, though, we talked about fear and faith both using the same muscles. And we spent a good deal of time talking about the 6 fears and kind of overcoming them in the sense, but it was very much in the negative. So how do we flip that? So we're using the fear muscle, and that's driving us, but we're saying faith takes the same muscle and the same amount of energy and effort that fear does. So how can people flip the script and take what maybe is a fear and turn it into something that they believe?
So another thing that we end up doing in our culture is that we take optimism and we sort of like vilify it, and we almost feel like we're bragging if we look and start talking about what we want to happen, right? It feels like we're doing a disservice. Yeah. So we make noble pessimists, and we make, you know what I mean? It's sort of backwards. So if you put all your time into like proclaiming and dreaming and using your imagination about what you want to happen, you'll never end up and that's what I want to do. Let's think. Have I thought about dying today? You're not going to say that,
right?
So use all your time in all of the areas. Like if you're fearing losing your job, saying, you know, if I could start today just doing anything that I could ever dream of, what would I pick today?
Yep.
And let your imagination like dictate to you what you want to dream of. If you're coming up with awful stuff when you do those things, you're on the other side of the equation, and you just move it on the other side.
Yeah. No, I think that faith muscle is so important, because if you work out the fear muscle, it's literally the same muscle that you need for faith. It's just picking a different target.
Yeah. Well, notice my example when we were high up in the trees, right? The reason that I started walking around without fear, like I wasn't going to fall, because of that harness, right? Yeah. I used that harness and leaned on that harness. I trusted that harness, so I stopped fearing what falling out of the tree would feel like.
Yeah. And so, you know, for those of you that have been watching, been with us, whatever you're afraid of, it doesn't have to control you. It doesn't need to be the end of you. We really want to see you exercise that faith muscle and step into something new. So try something new this week. Try something that you've been afraid of and step out and do that. Kind of like that show, Fear Factor. Just step up, own it, and step out there and try something new.
You're going to eat a bug?
No.
All right, what are we talking about next week?
Next week, next Tuesday, we'll be back in here. We want to help you become the best version of yourself, and we're gonna unpack. We're gonna unpack the chapter on desire. I reread that today.
Yes.
And since you said it's the one everyone needs to read, I think we need to talk about desire, passion, and man, there's so many good stories in there. I was going through them today, and I was hoping I wasn't gonna get sidetracked talking about it today, but Tuesday we'll hit that.
All right, cool.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. If you like our programming, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook page, or subscribe to your favorite podcast platform like iTunes or Spotify. This is original Youngstown content, and we would appreciate you sharing the videos and the word about us. Thank you.